A couple of things. From my experience and the experience of countless students, tens of thousands over a 33-year career, it's not my observation or belief that women have their emotions in sequence or that a seduction takes place in a sequence. I think women can have their emotions simultaneously. If you know how to do it, if you know how to communicate straight with the unconscious mind, you can create, well, first of all, we need to define what we mean by attraction, because it's an ill-defined term. When you say attraction, does it mean her vagina is wet, she's having sexual thoughts, or does it mean she's focused on you and she wants more of the interaction? To me, I more think about in terms of focus. My first aim is drawing focus, because focus is the currency of any kind of influence, persuasion, sales, seduction. If you can't get that focus, you're not getting anywhere, or you're going to lose the attention of that person. So my teaching to my students is you can get that focus, you can get what you would call comfort, you can even get deep connection very quickly. You can do it in a matter of minutes. I don't believe that women have their emotions in a linear fashion. I think it's relatively certain and provable that women have emotions about their emotions. So let's say a woman is feeling what you would call comfort. She could feel excited about her comfort. She could feel curious about her excitement, about her comfort. So I don't necessarily believe that women, or humans for that matter, experience their emotions in a linear fashion. That's the first point I'd make. The second point I'd make is, if you know how to do something, if you have a technology for doing something, it's going to seem impossible for the outside. But in my experience and the experience of my students, you don't need 7 hours. That's a model. And inside of that model, given what your technology is, you might need 7 hours, but I've done it in a matter of hours. Some of my students have done it in less. If you know how to do these things, you can create them simultaneously as well as sequentially, and you can do it relatively quickly. That's why we call it speed seduction. It's done quickly. Now, you can also do it in a way where there's not buyer's remorse. You can do it in a way where it feels, how can I put this, where it feels organic. Is it a little manipulative? Well, it's certainly structured in a way to get a response, but there's nothing dishonest about it. There's no, for example, and this is something I would like to ask you about, demonstrating higher value, telling these stories. Is it really demonstrating higher value, or is it just being really good as a storyteller, which is fine? Learning to tell stories is something that I teach, but I think there's a distinction between telling a story about how you are of higher value and actually showing it.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're really doing there is getting focus, which is something you can do with speed seduction. And my claim is you can do it a lot quicker. So you're the one who created it. I don't want to put words in your mouth. When you're doing a DHV, are you really demonstrating a higher value, whatever value means, however you define?
I'd love to get to defining it, if I may.
Yeah, please.
This is something very important, is to understand what attraction is. So what is the purpose of life? We know the meaning, or rather, I cannot tell you the meaning of life, but we know the purpose of life, which is to survive and replicate. We've got roughly 28,000 days to make that happen, to survive and replicate. Replication is just a genetic means of continued survival. So you can't separate the two. It's not just survive, or replicate. It's survive and replicate. If I align with someone with value, survival and replication value, if they can demonstrate survival and replication value for me, I will wish to align with them to improve my chances as well. When I look to a woman, I look more for replication value than survival value. And generally, women look towards men more for survival value than replication value. But again, you cannot separate the two. That is the purpose of life. Not the meaning. I don't know the meaning of life, but the purpose of life is to survive and replicate. That's what value is. It's survival and replication value. And the neat thing is, if you can demonstrate some key DHVs, demonstrations of higher value, pings within a story, that's what makes a DHV story. It's just a story of your choice with a couple bragging spikes built in. No one else is going to brag for you. And
What spikes?
the wingman. Yeah, a couple spikes. And you don't want the DLVs, demonstrations of lower value. But that makes up, those key moments where, if, for instance, I were to say, I went to the Hollywood sign, and if you go there, I went there with a girlfriend who, if you're so inclined to rating women from 1 to 10, which I'd never do, she was off the charts, a very beautiful, beautiful actress. And we jumped the fence, went up to the Hollywood sign, touched it for good luck. Trust me, it works. I'll pause here. The fact that I'm talking about a beautiful girl is the DHV. I would rather have girls with me, of course, like we did yesterday. We had girls with us, and then you can open up adjacent groups very proficiently because you have girls with you. But what if you don't have women with you? You have to start from scratch. You've got to put your best foot forward. So you can trigger attraction by triggering the 5 key DHVs that make a woman, or not make her, that allow her to feel that you have value for her. And I have defined the 5 DHVs thusly. First is pre-selection. 80% of all attraction is a woman knowing that you're pre-selected by other women. That presumes you have all the other characteristics. Pre-selection is number 1. Leader of men, protector of loved ones, a willingness to emote, to show a rich range of emotion, not hide behind a smile, the American smile, and successful risk taker. If you can convey
here's my point, Aaron. Here's my point.
It triggers attraction. Go ahead.
Here's my point. Is telling a story that you did that actually demonstrating it, or is it just telling a good story? Someone may not believe your story. Look, I understand if you're in a society and you're someone who's got the highest status and you actually are protecting your loved ones and you're showing it, are you actually really demonstrating it? Or are you telling a story about where you demonstrated it? And I think it's a really important distinction. In speed seduction, I'm not interested in talking about myself. That's not what I believe we should be doing. We ought to be capturing and leading the imagination and the emotions and the focus of a woman by using certain techniques and speaking in a certain way, and by the energy we bring to the approach. How do we prepare before we go out? What are the rituals? What are the things we do to prepare our state? So I am not interested in starting the conversation by talking about myself, or even talking about myself very much at all. I think it could, in certain situations, come off as bragging, and if it's done right. Yeah. And
art form.
I've talked to so many women who've said the number one mistake, the number one thing we can't stand about guys is they talk about themselves. So what I would like to introduce is some of the things that I'm teaching. I've heard you and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
First and foremost, capture and lead the imagination and the emotions of that woman. Speak in a way that evokes emotional states. Now, I don't believe you have to get comfort first. I don't believe you have to get attraction first or seduction first. You can do them simultaneously, and you can do it by being very direct. Let me tell a story, a true story. All my stories are true, but I swear on my star, it's true. So once upon a time, I was going to get my nails done at a salon in Marina del Rey. I opened the door, and it's obviously very crowded. I said to the woman, "How long is the wait?" She said, 30 minutes. I said, "Way too long." As I was leaving, I turned and looked over my shoulder and saw a very, very attractive blonde woman drying her nails.
That's rare.
Well, hold on. In a club or a bar, it's rare. Hold on. Out in the real world, it's not so rare. So, well, hold on. And I'll give you some counterexamples in a minute. So she's drying her nails, and as I'm leaving, I turn and look back, and I let the door close, and I thought, no, go back in there. So I went back and I said to her, "Excuse me, I was leaving. but as soon as I saw you, you stopped me dead in my tracks, and I had to come talk to you. Boom. Now I forget what patterns I ran on her, but afterwards, when I was debriefing her, after I debriefed her, she said, you know, you were so bold, you were so confident, you didn't give a fuck about what other people in the salon thought. Everyone was watching. You didn't care. That made my pussy wet almost instantly. So that's an example of actually showing confidence. That's an example of not me talking about times when I was confident. It was an example of being direct. And it was that directness, along with some of the language patterns that she didn't pick up, that actually worked. Now, given the context of a club, I can see how that would not work. But a lot of women don't spend their times in bars and clubs and parties. And further, my audience, guys in their 40s and 50s, and some younger guys.
My students were in their 40s and 50s, and we went to the after parties, we went to the parties, we went to the bottle service nights. We did it all. We did bars. We demonstrated a diverse range of events over 3 days and 3 nights. We did 3 venues per night, 9 venues this weekend. It was a joy, surrounded by love at every venue.
Okay, what I'm saying is that many guys are just not going to go to bars. They're not going to have access to those venues. You mentioned the word bottle service. How many guys can get access to bottle service?
Oh, I
would
didn't pay for it.
show up in a way if I
got
could.
invited.
If I could, well, you got invited because your status and your mystery, of course. The guy who's in Podunk, Idaho, who's living, who's working 12 hours a day because he's got his own career. He's a successful career person, or he's running his own business. He doesn't have time to go to bars and clubs. I personally, even with you by my side, whispering in my ear, would not go because I can't stand noise. I can't stand crowds. I can't stand drunk people. I just would not go. But there's a larger
that does add up to you coming up with enough excuses not to go to the party, and
I would not go. It's not an excuse. I just would not.
You're missing out, my friend. The parties in Hollywood Hills.
There's a larger point here. How many guys, if they don't know you or someone in that scene, can get those invitations? But more importantly, that was an example of what you said can't work, which is direct approach. I showed my interest. You say don't show.
No, on a single set.
I showed my interest directly. I did it in a way where there's no shame. And I think when a guy can show that kind of balls, combine it with a unique thing. I didn't go up to her and say, hey, I think you're so beautiful, I had to come back in. Didn't work. I said, when I saw you, you stopped me dead in my tracks, which is something that's very unique, something she wouldn't be used to hearing. And boom. So it is possible to be direct. I think the distinction between direct and indirect, maybe it's not so important one. You can, with speed seduction, you can do both, and they're equally effective.